Hello, everybody. It's good to see all of your faces. This is Kathleen Trapphagen, and I'm facilitating the GFE OST Impact Group. Welcome. So we are talking post-election today. We made it to the other side of the election. Give yourself a cheer. And we have a lot of smiles on our faces. So we have some super excellent all-woman cast today to lead us through implications, forecast, challenges, opportunities at all the different levels, federal, state, and local. So it's a pretty packed hour. I will say in the beginning that this is not the only conversation that we're going to have about implications of elections. And when we were doing our planning call, we came up with probably 4 or 5 separate conversations that we will have, probably 2021, digging into several things that we are going to talk about today, including workforce issues, the idea of community learning, the hubs. Definitely we'll be talking about federal policy transitions, what happened at the state level, and also local and state ballot initiatives, all sorts of things. But today we're going to do a quick overview of everything to get us sort of framed and settled. So I'm going to start out by asking folks to introduce yourself in the chat. And let's do name, organization. Let us know if you are funding policy at a federal, state, or local level. And also tell us one thing that you're super excited to do this weekend. So put all that in the chat as we're talking. And I'm going to turn it over. So the first thing that we're going to do is hear from our representatives for federal, state, and local. And then we're going to ask you to join a small group. So we're going to do small groups for part of this hour based on those categories, and then we'll come back together. So the first thing I'm going to do is turn it over to Jodi Grant of Afterschool Alliance. She's going to get us started. And with her is Lynette Fraga she's CEO of Childcare Aware of America. So the two of them are going to give us the federal scene, and then we'll move into the state scene with Ashley Wallace of National Conference of State Legislatures, and then local with Bela Spooner of the National League of Cities Institute for Youth Education and Families. So Jodi, take it away.
All right. Done. Forgive me, folks. Here we go. Play from start. So I wanted to start with this slide. This slide is actually from 2014, but we are. So I'm going to give you some embargoed information. We are going to be releasing our 2020 numbers of surveys with parents that we did as part of our America After 3 p.m. report. And what we found back in 2014, and we found it even stronger now, is that 87% of parents support public funding of after-school programs. And I want to flag this because when we talk about the election, if you read the news, all you read about is the divisions. And when we talk about after school, and Lynette's going to talk about childcare, these are issues that have always been bipartisan. And they remain strong, whether you're talking about party affiliation, rural, suburban, urban areas, ethnicity, race. And I think it places us in a really good position as we think about the future and we look at the composition at the federal, state, and local government level as to what we might be able to move and what we might be able to do. So, I wanted to flag that very much. And we did a parent survey during COVID that we'll be releasing as part of our America After 3 results in December too, which confirms once again that this is top of mind and super important for parents. The election, as we trickle in the results, I think looking at, what we have seen is, is going to be, pretty divided government, new leadership, but the House margin of Democrats is tighter. The Senate, we don't know what's going to happen in Georgia. Right now, it's 50-48 Republican to Democrat. I do think that things that can be done by regulation, executive order, are going to make some major changes right away. And I think particularly for those of us that are concerned about diversity, equity, inclusion, some of the real challenges we've had on race and immigration, I think we're going to see changes to that week one. And from where I'm sitting, some of the things that I'm counting on are: one, there's real concern about training for diversity, equity, inclusion for anyone that gets federal dollars in any way, shape, or form. I've actually written a blog about that. My blog will be obsolete because I suspect not only will that be allowed, I think it will be encouraged by the new administration. I think that there were a bunch of civil rights protections for students that were put in place by the Obama administration. Most notably, this had to do with students being able to choose which bathroom to use if they are transgendered or gender fluid. That was repealed by the Trump administration. And students were told that they had to use the bathrooms of their birth gender, things like that. Going to go back to where they were prior to the Trump administration. I think there'll be a real push to make sure that students can feel safe wherever they are. Dreamers, both in our programs and dreamers that are working in our programs, they can have access to assistance. We're not going to be worried about what may happen to them in the next 4 years. They will be, allowed to stay safely in the US. One of the other big things, and this dates back to the beginning of the administration, was a lot of immigrant families were afraid to fill out free and reduced lunch forms. It's a lot of the same issues around the census. Whether or not they were here legally, they were afraid that there might be consequences. As a result, we saw places lose their Title I funding, which can impact their after-school funding. And I think that a lot of those fears they're not going to have to worry about filling out those forms anymore, the same way sanctuary cities and ICE raids that were coming to some of our programs, that will not be happening anymore. So I think it will be a much safer place for those of us to try to serve kids in a place that's safe. And we won't have to, there's a lot of effort around the beginning of the term of this president just to get resources out because parents were being deported, because kids were fearful about they themselves being deported. And I think a lot of that fear is going to go away. Another nice piece is that we've been in touch with the Center for Disease Control. I think they are, this is not meant to sound partisan. This is just some realities. I think there's been a sense that the CDC has been politicized, and they have definitely had some boundaries that they could not cross, kind of handcuffs on, and they are already reaching out to us, eager to work on putting out some guidelines on what's safe, and making sure that, as we run programs, as things change, we have the latest information. And then the last piece was just, I am worried about the census. It was ended early in October, and I think the combination of COVID and particularly immigrant families that were afraid to fill out the census may lead to some cuts in a bunch of our programs in areas where there are high immigrant populations. So where do we go from here? I think we've been doing a lot of thinking, and the great thing about our space is that we appeal to everyone, and we need to continue to do that. And the reason we do that is because after-school programs are local. And so as long as we can keep elevating local voices in rural, suburban, urban communities all across the country as to what these programs mean, I think we're going to be in pretty good position. I think most of the emphasis is going to be on COVID and recovery, and I think that after-school programs are essential to that. So I think that also, is a good place for us to be. To date, about $600 million of CARES Act, and that's not the PPP loans, have gone to after-school programs, and we will see that number go up, and that's as they start creating these hubs or doing all sorts of other learning environments, and it's childcare dollars, governor's discretion dollars, and we're starting to see some of the education dollars flow to after-school programs. One of the big things that I know we're going to have another session about that I'm very excited about is after-school programs across the country are creating hubs where kids can come, where it's based on the blueprint we put out, if they have virtual learning, if they have staggered learning, and have a safe place where they can do their virtual learning, get academic support, and also get enrichment. And so obviously this is expensive to do. You need more time, you need more space, you need more staff, but there's some great examples of it happening. And I think that it's really exciting for now, but I think it's really exciting for the future, because I think the one thing we absolutely do not want to forget is that some of these innovations during COVID are good for the kids we care about. They're creating more opportunities. We don't want to lose them. So this idea that learning can occur outside the school building is getting cemented in America. And as we move forward, I'm hoping that we can take that, especially during the recovery, to allow kids to go to after school programs, hubs, centers, and get credit for the work that they're doing there. And I think there's a lot of ways to bring in internships, apprenticeships, entrepreneurships, some of the virtual opportunities that kids didn't have access to subjects or teachers before, and really create more opportunity and choice in education as a whole through our field. So with that, I just wanted to show you one quick picture. This is the state of Vermont, and they are creating these hubs for students that, of course, is not mandatory, but students that cannot learn at home or would like to, their parents are working, would like to be somewhere where they're interacting in a socially safe pod situation. Vermont is really taking the lead at a state level in developing these hubs. And we are working on a report of best practices, but I can tell you now that in many places, they are just starting to create hubs. So this is going to be something you see grow over the next few weeks and months. Now it is my pleasure to hand this over to Lynette.
Thank you, Jodi, so much for the introduction. And hello, everyone. My name is Lynette Fraga, and I am the CEO of Child Care Aware of America. And I so appreciated Jodi's conversation and highlights. And I can't say strongly enough that now is an opportunity for real change around childcare, early learning, and school age care in this country. I'll touch on several of the factors shaping this opportunity, including the election and the pandemic, and growing public awareness and support around childcare, early learning, and school age care. And again, so appreciate the opportunity to speak to you this afternoon about, or this morning, given where you are, about this. And so as Jodi shared, there is widespread support for public funding of after-school programs. She shared her polling information, and in a Child Care Aware of America and Save the Children Action Network survey that we did earlier this year, we found similar, overwhelming, and bipartisan support for public funding to provide relief for childcare. And I believe we saw the support at the ballot box earlier this month too. We know that childcare is a foundational issue in every community in the United States, and we saw many policymakers who champion childcare and care for school-age children win re-election. And we saw that when support for early learning or education itself was on the ballot, actually, in the form of state or local initiatives. They won too in many places. Well, I know my colleagues a bit later are going to touch on these in more detail. I will mention that in St. Louis, Missouri, they approved a local initiative for birth to 5 programs and services within the city. Multnomah County in Oregon passed a universal preschool ballot measure that also improves workforce compensation and supports for infant and toddler care. And Colorado passed a statewide initiative to support universal pre-K. These are bridge building opportunities, I believe, for a birth to school age agenda. This election has shown us that support for childcare, early learning, and school age care is strong. And this election also ushers in a new administration at the federal level. And our vision at Child Care Aware of America hasn't changed, as I'm sure for many of you, it has not either. As we approach this transition in leadership for our nation, we continue to remain committed to ensuring that every family in the United States has access to an equitable, high quality, affordable childcare system. The fact is that our childcare system is broken, and it's not working for families and educators and employers and communities, or importantly, children. So no matter who the president is, which party leads Congress, or what our state legislatures look like, we have a childcare system in desperate need of support. And we at our organization continue our advocacy efforts to re-envision what is the art of the possible and build a childcare system that is child-centered and family-engaged and equity-driven and community-focused, which is part of our own strategic plan. That system can and should solidify the connections between childcare, early learning, and school-age care. Again, I think about this as a from birth agenda. CCAOA is driven and committed to couple the data and the research we do with equity-focused advocacy to build this agenda, but data doesn't tell the whole story. Any revisions to our current system must respond to the honest lived experiences of children, families, and providers in community. Which is why we've worked this year and over the last several months to make sure we listen to these stakeholders as we seize the opportunity we believe exists in making real transformational change and consider the art of the possible in the childcare system. So we start from scratch in building supports. Over 4 weeks in the fall, we held roundtables to hear CCR&Rs, or Child Care Resource and Referral Agencies. These are community-based organizations that number over 400 across the United States who really are focused on early learning and school-age care. Families, employers, child care providers, and our national early childhood education thought partners. And we heard about 5 similar topics I just want to touch on briefly through all of these virtual gatherings. We heard about first how the system might start from scratch. We heard about workforce supports for both providers and for families. We heard about financial supports needed, of course, for the system and for individuals. We heard about health and safety supports, and we heard about supports for and from employers. Some of the messages and stories that I think really speak to the full spectrum of challenges that each of us from wherever we sit are really facing as we work to re-envision childcare, early learning, and school-age care include things like the challenges of virtual learning and accessing pandemic assistance through the internet. Whether it was lack of access to a reliable internet connection or lack of familiarity with online loan or grant application processes, these became very frustrating for parents. They can become very frustrating for providers who lack the time and support to engage. In addition to thinking about digital learning, similarly, lack of access and supports to help providers and parents complete school assignments. There are so many unmet tech needs all across the United States. We heard that we should fight to pay providers for the real cost of care, and we should fight for a living wage and benefits for childcare teachers. We also heard from families that any childcare policy fights must occur alongside a fight for paid and family medical leave, paid maternity leave, paid sick leave, and better workplace flexibility. We heard about the need to ensure that health and safety supports are in place for childcare and that educators have the resources that they need. And we heard from employers too, that expressed that the pandemic has, and for many the first time, made them actually think deliberately and thoughtfully about childcare in their communities as a necessary employee benefit. I finally just want to touch a little bit on strategies for re-envision childcare. This work to re-envision childcare is important for the conversation about how best we serve school-aged children and best provide care during out-of-school times. What we know is that especially during the pandemic, there is a lot of overlap between the programs and providers who are part of the childcare system, and specifically those who offer subsidy as a part of the federal Child Care and Development Block Grant Program, and those who are providing out-of-school time care. Re-envisioning CCDBG would benefit all of the children and families that we serve. In the short term, we continue to advocate for at least $50 billion in immediate relief to support the childcare sector. And I think this is our most important charge. We cannot take this as given, even with the election results, especially since we are unlikely to see major shifts in the makeup of Congress. There is also the long-term issue of re-envisioning and rebuilding the entire childcare system. This means, for example, advocating for a funding mechanism for childcare that will ensure its stability and its ability to support all families and children who need access. We think this message means mandatory funding. As you can imagine, however, getting from our current block grant funding for childcare to a mandatory spending program will take a long time. In the meantime, along the path, we need to fight for policies that get us closer to that new childcare funding vision. So we want to harness advocacy and data, incredibly important. Things are changing more quickly than we could imagine, and we need real-time data and equity as primary change agents. First, advocacy. It's clear that our community needs to do more to harness the real frustration and, yes, anger of parents at the failure of our nation to support childcare. We heard that loud and clear from parents all over the United States as we held these roundtables. And channeling this into a coordinated effort to fix the broken childcare system will take intense pressure on policymakers by constituents from all walks of life. In addition, cutting through the noise of competing political needs and economic interests in the coming months and years will take a significant amount of political will. Next, I just want to focus quickly on data. Data has to inform our advocacy work. At Child Care Aware of America, we're committed to taking a comprehensive, human-centered design and data-informed approach to our work. For the past few decades, we've done, I think, a great job in being a leader in this area, but we continue to need to illustrate and utilize data to illustrate critical inequities in the childcare system and to increase and fight for the supply of quality, affordable care. Jodi mentioned a lot of issues in her presentation, and all of those issues need to be informed by data. She mentioned at the census, which is data about who we're serving and how we're serving. We are now positioned to take all of these data and really make sure we're amplifying it. The third critical element of our future vision is the need to center equity. We will prioritize the stories of parents who have been both underrepresented in childcare advocacy, Black, Indigenous, Hispanic, Latino, and other underrepresented parents and children. We do have the opportunity to re-envision childcare, early learning, and to school-age care. We must commit to thinking about work across childcare and across age and location and time of care and where we're accessing care and what your zip code is. We have to commit to thinking about where our children are. And we have to work together to make this happen. If no time like now, we've experienced the importance of community-based work in the grassroots, in communities, and making connections between all of those entities that care about children and families and communities. So we have to do this together. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak to you today, and I look forward to the discussion later. And now I'm turning it over to our next colleague on the agenda.
Great, that's Ashley from the state level. So let me just get in for 1 second to have people do some thinking about which small group that they want to go into after we hear from Ashley and Bela super briefly. So one small group will be with Lynette and Jodi, focusing on federal. The second one will be with Ashley, focusing on state. And then the third will be with Bela, focusing on local perspectives. So start thinking about that, because we're going to go into small groups in the next 12 minutes or so. So Ashley, take it away.
Great. Hopefully you can all see my screen here.
Yes,
okay,
we can.
Okay, so I'm just going to start out with and I'm Ashley Wallace with National Conference of State Legislatures, also known as NCSL. I'm going to start out with a quick overview of what happened in state elections and what are the takeaways for you all. Here you see there were state elections in all but 6 states, and those are the ones in gray this year. And then this is how it looks post-election in terms of legislature party control, and not much changed here. The only one that changed was New Hampshire, went from blue to red. So both of their chambers switched from Democratic control to Republican. And the other change to note here, or the other thing, I should say, it's not a change. There's only one split legislature, and that's pretty unusual. That's the lowest since 1952. And what that tells me is that states legislatures are either red or they're blue, and so that tells me that at the state level, state policy should be moving along probably, and not a lot of gridlock there. So that's my big takeaway from this. And here you see state government post-election. And by state government, I mean not only the legislature party control, but also the governor's seats. But here, there also wasn't a lot of movement. 9 incumbents won, and the other 2, there's only 2 open governor seats, and that was Utah, which stayed Republican, and Montana. And so that was the flip. So that went from Democratic control to to Republican control. And then I will note that at least 1,500 new state legislators are out there. And so there weren't, the president-elects didn't have those coattails. The president-elect party did not have those coattails that we typically see. In addition to the 1,500 new state legislators, there's also some new top leaders. And by top leaders, I mean either the Speaker of the House or the Senate President, Senate Pro Tem. And so you see there's at least 27, there's still some results coming in, at least 27 new top leaders and other new leaders in the states. And so while there's not a lot of political party change in the legislatures, there are a good number of leaders, and those leaders will come in with their, will set their own priorities. So I think there's a window of opportunity here to not only educate these new state legislators, but also these new leaders. And I'll also note that some education committees will have new chairs. Some human service committees might have some new chairs. One thing you might consider if there's community organizations that you work with, arranging a briefing, sponsoring a briefing, probably is going to be a virtual briefing for these new legislators and leaders, and really, and lending your name to something like that raises the visibility. I'm going to briefly go over to go through the ballot measures that relate to education. 86 of the 122 ballot measures across the United States passed. 4 are still pending. I promise I will not go through all 86, just focus here on the ones that have implications for education. And you see the asterisk there. Those are, that's where there is stated public school funds. And so cannabis was on all of these ballots. They all passed. You might know that some states have allocated some of their tax revenues to prevention, including youth serving organizations such as Afterschool. So there might be some opportunity around these. And then I'll go to the next one. The other one is sports betting. And I put an asterisk next to Maryland. So both of them passed. In Maryland, it could take up to a year before folks can make their first legal wager. Proceeds will be used to help fund K-12 public education. And it goes back to the legislature to work out the details around this. And then South Dakota also approves sports betting, but it's not as clear where the dollars are going. It too goes back to the legislature to work out those details. And then in terms of cigarettes and cigarette taxes and funds, I'm here in Colorado, and Lynette briefly mentioned the Prop EE that passed here. And I'll just note that in addition to the pre-K dollars, there's also, it also mentions prevention, tobacco prevention and cessation programs. So there might be some opportunity around that. And then finally, I wanted just to close here with some state policy outlook. And you see this picture here because we're hearing that a lot of state capitals will likely be closed to the public or have limited access to the public. So folks engaging the legislatures will need to be a little bit creative in terms of virtual or meeting outside socially distanced with legislators. But I kind of see these categories. So first and foremost, state legislatures, when they come back, will have to be dealing with some tough state budget considerations. And, you know, this goes back to some of Lynette's points around data. That becomes really important. Evidence-based policies. A lot of legislators and legislative staff that we've been talking to over the last couple of months really want to know what is happening at the ground level, what is working, what challenges are folks facing. So you and the folks that you fund can really bring those stories in order to help them make these decisions. And then I also mentioned, some low-cost policy options to do things more efficiently, better coordination and a collaboration across sector. I think this makes the case for school community collaboration. COVID recovery, both general and education related. Obviously, economic recovery and raising up the after schools role in helping working families get, some folks might think of childcare, but not so much school age care. I think that they have realized the importance of school age care over the last number of months. Jodi mentioned the COVID relief funding. So this is going to continue to be a policy lever at the state level, helping kids catch up and keep up. And I would also include re-engaging kids with learning. I have 2 small kids, and I know online learning, they went from really being engaged in school to not engaged in school. And we know that out of school time programs have that hands-on engaging techniques to help them catch up and keep up and re-engage with learning. So some implications for summer learning here. This was mentioned by Jodi before. Will we see some more school calendar bills? And that's actually something that I track in addition to after school bills. So I'm a resource on that. I'm also going to.
Ashley, sorry. I know we're just running a little bit
Okay.
behind. And so if folks are interested in digging into some of this, then they'll choose your small group. But I want to give Bela a chance to do a quick overview so we can really move into that.
Sounds
Sorry.
good.
Yeah.
So, and the last thing, I'll reiterate the community learning piece down here. And I will turn it
Great.
over to Bela, and I'll put, I'm going to put some bill tracking links in the chat box.
Great. And I will, Bela, right before you come on, I just want to reiterate that we will give everybody the full slide decks. So there's so much great information in everybody's slide decks. Those will be on the website, and we will give them to you after. Okay. Yeah, Bela.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. Kathleen, I'm trying to share my screen and it says I can't. So you can help me out.
Oh, okay. Hang on.
Sure.
You should be good to go now.
Okay.
Should we go now? Okay.
Jesse's gotcha.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. There we go. All right. I know we're running out of time here, so I'm going to make it quick, but I'm Bela Shah Spooner with the National League of Cities. Pleasure to be with this group again. So a lot in terms of some of the local things that have happened this election season have been mentioned, so I won't go into it too much. But what I see as the main local story is, it's interesting. In 2020, there were not actually a lot of big mayoral races as we saw in 2018, 16. A lot of the big cities, there's a lot of change, a lot more diversity in leadership. A couple big city races were Baltimore and San Diego. Riverside's not a big city, but I went to high school there, so I put it in. But we did love the mayor there. So a little bit more research needs to be done on some of these new folks, but a lot of consistency still in terms of leadership at the mayoral level. I looked across also all of the United States Conference of Mayors membership of 1,400 mayors. There were only 100 new mayors, and they were in primarily a lot of small cities, but still interesting to see what may be happening there. We talked about some of the local ballot measures, so I won't go into this that much, but definitely still seeing support for kids, for young people, in terms of voters passing a number of bills that will help school districts with their operating funds, as well as a lot of pre-K. But what I see as the big story is really that cities are waiting for federal support. And NLC has been advocating very hard for relief to city government in any kind of new relief package. And as you can see here, they have been severely impacted, all size cities, from the small ones under 50,000 to the very large ones, and they have not received relief, which has really been impacting their public services. So we have seen a lot of communities that have had to cut their programs, cut summer programs, cut summer youth employment, cut after school, over this pandemic. We're still concerned about it because relief hasn't come. We're hopeful now that we'll see something come to them soon, so they'll be able to fill in some of those gaps. But that's definitely been a concern. And so as a result, as Jodi alluded to, we've seen an amazing kind of rise up of these community learning hubs. I put the link that NLC did a report, an executive summary, kind of detailing this idea of a community learning hub where different sectors of the community are coming together. So you have Parks and Rec departments, you have libraries, you have the mayor's office, you have, if they have a Department of Children, Youth and Families, nonprofits, faith-based organizations, after school providers really coming together to support young people, to give them digital access during this time of remote learning, to be able to access technology to do their work, adults, caring adults, homework help, a lot of the meal distribution is happening there as well. So this graphic we put together to kind of really talk about and demonstrate how communities are wrapping their arms around young people. And there was a brief conversation in the chat about this, and Jodi alluded to it as well, that, we're really feel that this model of community learning is not only for today, not only for the pandemic, but certainly afterwards as well. We've been tracking a number of places, and I put this map together late last night and even found some more. So there are over 50 places that are doing this, and not all of them are mayoral-led, city-led. The cities are really playing a key role in many of these places, but you do see places that are being lifted up by faith-based organizations and YMCAs in a lot of places. So we are very excited about kind of how this work is happening and how people are coming together, and feel like, at the local level, certainly as new resources come down from the federal government, that we'll see more of this as well, but that cities are really stepping up, and they know that young people are suffering and families are suffering, and they need childcare and they need to go to work, and people are looking for employment. And so these community learning hubs have really played a role, to step into that space. Was I 5 minutes, Kathleen?
That's awesome, Bella. Thank you so much. Yes. Okay. So if you want to stop sharing your screen, I will share my screen. And okay, so what we're going to do now, and this is a little bit new, so you guys have to bear with us, which is we are going to go into small groups. All right, people, let's do it. Zoom learning. Thanks for coming back, everybody, and for going into the small groups. I hope that you at least got some conversations started and got uplifted threads for further conversation. I will touch base with all of the moderators to find that out, because we don't have time to go through that now. I want to thank Jodi, Lynette, Ashley, and Bella for stepping up in a super, super busy time and busy week to talk with us. And there's just so much there. We will definitely share the deck and really dig into some of these things. I was in Bella's group for a second, and one of the themes that we were just talking about is the importance of strong partnerships among your community-based organizations and out-of-school time providers that have really the foundation and the bedrock of community learning hubs with the school districts. And so I think one thing I'll leave us to think about is how can you and us also as facilitators of this network really dig into what's the role of philanthropy in helping build your grantees' capacity and your school district's capacity to truly work together in a partnership, not transactional way. And that is definitely a problem we have not yet solved, as everybody was like smiling and sighing when the conversation came up. But really, this year is forcing us to step up and solve this problem better. And I think that we can really dig into this as to what is the philanthropic role here, right? So I also want to give a shout out to the National Summer Learning Association. They've got some excellent programs for next week. Go on summerlearning.org and sign up for their Summer Leadership Solutions series, I think they're calling it. That is really good. And also just final welcome to Lynette. We just met this week. That was through Jodi. Thank you, Jodi. I am so excited to continue to strengthen the way that we talk about the whole continuum from birth through, basically young adult, right? And so the more that we understand and talk to the folks that are in the early childhood policy and advocacy and practice circles, when we understand that that actually means also school-age childcare, and that then the link is to youth development and teen programs, the better we're all going to be. And we know we have that challenge as funders too, to make those linkages. So we're going to continue to work on that. So no shortage of work to do, but it's Friday, so go have a great weekend. We will be back with you in December. Thank you so much. Take care, everybody.